Hi everyone, I'm Mike Dolan from the Linux Foundation. I've been working on, we're working with a community of people trying to bring together a set of stakeholders who are interested in working on wallets and digital wallets specifically. Wallets that can be multi-purpose, wallets that can have digital assets that are portable, wallets that can do more things than just what one company designs them to do necessarily. If you think about today, many of us have a wallet in our pockets. This has many different things from many different companies. It has currency, it has healthcare identity cards for insurance purposes. And if you think about this in a digital context, we have a number of stakeholders in financial services, gaming, and elsewhere who are automotive that we're working with on other open source projects, and they're all looking at the future of there's this digital identity, there's this digital asset that I need to be able to store somewhere. How do we do it in such a way that I don't have to go find my own digital wallet team and build this all up from scratch on my own? And so that kind of brought a common purpose of stakeholders together. There's some details we're still figuring out, but we have been working on an Open Wallet Foundation launch for that. And one very relevant use case and scenario around this is the Metaverse, because we have a number of organizations we work with who are focused on the Metaverse and building things out. And so as we look at gaming, as we look at Metaverse use cases, wallets, transactions, all those things are going to have to be supported. And not every company wants to go recreate their entire stack themselves or figure this out on their own and go build an entire ecosystem to work with. So the idea is if we build something out in the open together, we can build something that's multi-purpose and shareable across a number of different parties. I am not a wallet or technical expert in this space, so I brought some friends today. So Ori and Clea are going to fill out the remaining time here with something that's a little bit more pointed around the technology and some of the thoughts and conversations we've been having. And with that, I'll hand it over.
Thanks. I'm mic'd, so you can take that with you. Thanks, Mike. I think there's been a lot of work on bringing the stakeholders together around the Open Wallet Foundation, and that builds on years of work in many different communities. So we're like, originally this session had currency in the title. Although cryptocurrencies are cool and are going to be key in the metaverse, there's way more things that need wallets and need cryptography to support them working. And so we're going to share some of the standards that have come out of the digital identity community and their application in the metaverse. But it's years of work trying to get to where we are now, and it's really exciting to see trying to pull different types of wallets together. Like there's wallets and work on wallets for hotel rooms and for car doors and for capabilities to get into concerts, and like, does the person who bought the ticket match the person going into the gate? All sorts of really cool problems. So lots of good work. Oh, that's us. We're here to talk to you. And Mike already talked about this. And so Ori is leading, not leading, but is one of the many emergent leaders working on the architecture task force, and is going to share more about it.
Awesome. So it's a pleasure to be with you all. We only have a few slides, so I'm hoping that the slides that we are going to share here are going to pique your interest and be just vague and confusing enough to get you to ask a bunch of questions that we can consume the remainder of the time with. That being said, I am sharing some preliminary architecture diagrams that we've been developing in our meetings at the Open Wallet Foundation sort of formation stage. These diagrams are in Mermaid.js, and they're available on GitHub. If you see a diagram that seems exciting, you want to make some changes to it or propose things, the source is available on GitHub. This architecture task force's mission within the Open Wallet Foundation is to start to create some structure for explaining the relationships between these concepts that are fundamental to what a digital wallet is. And so as I'm speaking, I'm sure you're looking at the slides and you're seeing this top bar at the top that says storage. It says encrypted storage. It says key storage. And that's a fundamental component of building secure systems today. We're interested in where are the keys that are authoritative for an identity being stored. We're interested in where are the keys that are going to be used to prove cryptographic assertions about that identity being stored. So digital wallets have to have some way of maintaining sensitive material or access to sensitive material, such as keys. And this top layer is separated from the bottom layer, but you'll see cryptographic keys are kind of in both of them. I think this is a really important thing to point out about digital wallets, especially if you're thinking about digital wallets in the context of cryptocurrency wallets, where you compute often keys that you use to maintain assets. You don't store all of those keys like in a big key ring with an infinite number of keys on it. You compute the keys you need to manage digital assets. And so when we think about digital wallets in the metaverse, we have to be supportive of the wallet standards that have emerged in the blockchain ecosystems to date. And a lot of those systems involve computing key material from mnemonics and other wallet standards that have gained adoption for managing cryptocurrencies on public blockchains. So the other thing I'd like to sort of point out here is this middle bar, which is the most exciting part of the Open Wallet Foundation's work. We're looking at digital objects, and like you've already heard a couple examples of digital objects that might go in a wallet. So the typical identity documentation use cases, things like mobile driver's licenses, health credential cards, gym membership cards, those kinds of identity documents that have your name as the subject and some expiration and some period of validity. That identity card gives you some ability to move and interact in the physical world. Those same kinds of identity cards could have an impact on metaverse experiences as well. And there might be even scenarios where you're bringing a digital credential that was originally designed for the physical world and physical world interactions, but suddenly it has use in a metaverse experience. The other section that you see here are these financial instrument, things like credit cards, debit cards, other loyalty programs. Those are in your physical wallet today, they represent payment capabilities. And in digital wallets that have been developed and adopted to date on major operating system platforms, there are payment capability systems that are built directly into that operating system. And you might be using these today to purchase products online and confirming transactions on your mobile phone. But those payment instruments are connected to a series of standards that other folks can implement support for. So when we think about openness in a wallet ecosystem, we're imagining giving to developers the capabilities to build experiences on top of these payment capabilities. How do we represent them? What's different about a tokenized credit card compared to a cryptocurrency holding on an ERC20 token? So you might have a digital wallet that holds your capability to use tokenized credit cards, but also holds your ability to manage keys that own cryptocurrency or that control the transfer of digital assets and non-fungible tokens. One other sort of interesting thing to think about here is this concept of physical keys being reflected in digital wallets. So your hotel room card or your car key, those are physical cards you use to move through doors today. But those same physical keys have some metaverse analogy as you try and enter a new access restricted area. How can I present my physical key in the virtual space to access that area? What is that experience like? And at the same time, we're seeing the development of digital wallet systems in IRL, the physical space, for accessing hotels or accessing a car. So I think there's a case here where I think the thing that we're all excited about is this blending of digital and real together. Technology standards that were built to solve physical authorization schemes, for automotive or for the travel industry are now actually relevant to digital experiences and vice versa. We might start to see solutions in the metaverse that have a novel or efficient cryptographic solution to a particular problem actually being developed first in that space and then ported back to the real world, or whatever you call this, and then the other way as well, right? So I think these are all really exciting sort of opportunities that digital wallets are the entry point into imagining some of those scenarios. If you think about how many times as you move around physical real world space, you're pulling out your wallet, you're presenting an identity capability or a payment capability or other kinds of activity like that. When you move through virtual space, you're going to be probably interacting in similar ways. So the bottom part, skip over the policy engine for now. We're not really sure what we're doing with that yet. The protocols piece, that's important to understand these kinds of standards for interaction. And in some of the next slides, I'm going to show you or point to a couple places where protocols have been used. But the thing to keep in mind is that there isn't one protocol to rule them all. This isn't, that kind of thing. There's going to be more than one way to accomplish some of these, usages of these digital objects. So I don't want folks to come away with the idea that there's only one protocol for the metaverse. I think the metaverse is going to be filled with a diversity of protocols, and some of them are going to have lots of users, very popular. Others are going to be less popular and have less users. But I think it's important to be inclusive of multiple formats for digital objects and multiple protocols for exchanging those objects. All right. So I'm going to talk about one component of digital identity, and it's one I'm familiar with because I worked on this standard, the W3C, called the Decentralized Identifiers specification. And this standard describes a way to create cryptographic identifiers. And these identifiers, they're arrows, they point at things. It's an identifier, not an identity. So you could have many of them, and I could have many identifiers that point to me. I could have many identifiers that point to objects that I own or my pets, really whatever I want to identify in some way that's cryptographically verifiable. The cool thing about decentralized identifiers is they're really open. You can create a new one. I'm editor of the W3C decentralized identifier specification registry. What a mouthful. It's a place where people register new identifier formats that comply with the standard. And I see a new one getting registered, a couple of them every week. It's very easy to build a new decentralized identifier format. There's just a few simple rules that you have to apply. And then you've got your new identifier format registered. This particular image here describing the scheme and the did method and the did method specific identifier was thankfully already covered in a previous talk. Sam gave an excellent talk on digital identity earlier in the day. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking to you about this specific identifier format, but I want to draw your attention to this thing on the left side of your screen. It's a graph, and it represents the relationships that are behind a particular example identifier. And some of these relationships have to do with who can control key material. Some of them have to do with whether this particular key is used to create these things called verifiable credentials, which we're going to talk about in a second. Another has to do with whether this identifier is used to authenticate a subject. So you can imagine there could be a scenario where I want my car and its digital wallet to be able to authenticate itself as it moves through checkpoints in physical space. Or I might want a drone, to authenticate itself as it moves through volumes in 3D space. And when we talk about volumes, we're already thinking about volumes in the metaverse space as well. There's cases where authentication for specific identifiers could be an important component of building experiences in 3D space. All right, so I'm not going to play a video for you. I'm pointing to the slides have the link. You can click the link and watch it on your own time. There's a demo, a friend of mine built this demo, and his voice is speaking over the demo. And this is an example of using verifiable credentials to basically gate access to a particular volume in a metaverse world. And this is with a different engine, the Ethereal engine. And the thing on the left-hand side of your screen, it shows some sort of awkwardly colored teal buttons and some words about verifiable credentials and wallets. And this demonstration is really, really simple, and the purpose of it was to show how a particular credential technology and credential exchange protocol, the credential handler API, can be used to gate access to a 3D volume in a virtual world. So the first thing you see is this wallet store operation, and that's where the avatar is basically getting the credential that's going to allow them to access a 3D volume. And then the bottom part is the credential request operation, and that's where the 3D volume, as that avatar tries to enter that 3D volume, they're challenged. Just like you get challenged when you try and walk through airport security. They say, hold on, like show me your identity documents, show me evidence that you're allowed to proceed through this checkpoint. And in this case, the human user controlling the avatar, they can respond to that credential request with verifiable credentials that are stored in their wallet. And they can actually pick whichever wallet they want to use to respond to that request. And that's built off of this credential handler API, which is just one way to present and exchange verifiable credentials. And in Sam's talk earlier, he mentioned, DIDCOM and OpenID Connect for verifiable presentations. And those are other standard protocols that are being developed that support credential exchange. And it's exciting to imagine a world where you could just use DIDCOM to present credentials to move through 3D volumes, or a world where you might use DIDCOM and the credential handler API. So it's just as an example of like one place where these verifiable credentials have been shown to be useful in creating certain kinds of security objects that could control certain behaviors in a metaverse space. And that's it. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have about decentralized identifiers or verifiable credentials and metaverse wallets. And I guess there's a slide I might go back to would be this one, if we're going to leave a slide up to take any questions.
Mike's bringing the mic.
Oh. We have an online component too. So.
Hello, thank you for that. I'm not sure if this actually is a question for what you just covered or not, but you hear stories about people losing access to their wallets. Is there something in the works that would maybe help solve that particular problem that some users are having?
Awesome. Yeah, it's an excellent question. So I think it's a tough question to answer in the abstract, but certainly one of the original motivations behind a piece of specification I worked on in the W3C for wallets was about wallet recovery. So device failure. If you've got a mobile device, you've got credentials on that mobile device. I just take that mobile device and I throw it into water. It's gone, you're never getting it back. Does that mean that all of those credentials are gone forever? Or could I get a new device, authenticate, and sync my credentials to my new device? So there are cases where that's possible, and there are cases where it's not. And in particular, some forms of credentials have a device-bound cryptography component to them. So there's keys that are on that device in a secure enclave or some trusted hardware component. And they're not extractable, so you can't port them out of the device. And so if you have a credential that's bound to the physical device, and I destroy the physical device, yes, you will have to go back to an issuer to get a new digital driver's license or a new credential that is created in that way. But there are cases where that isn't what's happening and where you could have backed up your digital wallet to multiple trusted sources, and then you can recover that information whenever you want.
I'll add that the Wallet Security Working Group at DIF is kind of considering this kind of hybrid approach where high assurance, strong credentials like your driver's license or passport would have to be reissued, but many of the other credentials you have that are already bound to your name, for example, you could just recover, because if someone's checking that originating document and the secondary document like your university degrees or professional certifications or those sort of things, then, because you don't want to go get all of those again, right? So there's kind of middle ground between lose everything, recover everything, and hopefully we'll get the right sweet spot for most people that it'll work.
So
So maybe a related question. I had concerns about or questions about what happens. We're emulating things that exist today, right? No problems we know about. But what about things in the metaverse where because of these new constructs, there's new problems? So like the ability to bias a purchasing algorithm because I have all the identity links to the things you've been to or done in the last 3 years. Or the ability to, for a VA, if we use in the metaverse automated actors to execute things on my behalf, right? I don't want to go pick up my laundry all the time, but maybe now it's convinced that it needs to buy new detergent, a new car, and all that stuff as well. Like, how do you have hooks in the wallet to prevent? Or I know it's kind of way out there, but have you thought about these things yet?
So, I mean, the wallet as a structure, it holds things. If it holds only one identifier, and I use that same identifier for everything, I'm basically going around saying, please track me. Here's my stable identifier. I'm trying to build reputation with it, so I'm just going to use it. And that's great for certain kinds of experiences, like, you know, if I want to comment on Hacker News, I need to prove that I'm not a complete troll and that I can contribute constructively to conversations before, you know, maybe I'm going to be allowed to interact in certain ways. So there's cases where you need to build reputation and you want a stable, durable, correlatable identifier. And then there's cases where you really don't want that. And the wallet is a structure that would allow you to hold long-term public identifiers that you're totally comfortable with, like, you know, my professional LinkedIn account, my professional Twitter account, you know, these social network identities that I have, where I'm intentionally trying to build a positive reputation by long-term use of the same identifier. But then there's other cases where I might be, you know, trying to purchase something and it's, you know, sensitive, you know, and I feel uncomfortable about having that information tracked. I wouldn't want to use an identifier that could in any way be attached to an existing one. So there has to be some way of creating new, just-in-time private identifiers. But that is then in conflict with that reputation gating factor, right? So if I'm in a metaverse experience and I'm trying to buy, you know, digital shoes for my metaverse girlfriend, but I don't want her to see them as soon as I purchase them because she's following all of my accounts, how do I do that? Yeah, you're gonna need ways to create new identities and identifiers that you're in control of, but that are not correlated to your existing experiences. And the system and the user have to agree to the contract that manages that exchange of those information. So it can't, you know, in certain worlds where surveillance is, you know, pervasive and where all information is being extracted continuously, it could be very difficult to establish a new authentic and independent identifier for some intentional, you know, confidential purpose. And that could be a really important part of participating in new digital spaces, especially if you think about political activity in the metaverse or religious activity in the metaverse. You know, these users have rights to privacy online, just as they do, you know, to a right to assembly in person. So I think these are really good questions you're asking, but the wallet component is a tool for the users. Whether that wallet is going to be capable of giving them and sort of, I think the objective that you're maybe hinting at that they might want, that's a question for the world maker as well.
Policy engine. That's why I was.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll just compliment what Ori said. There's also, like, one of the reasons the community that we're actively a part of has been working on digital identity is one of the reasons data brokers exist today and track all that stuff is because we haven't had decent ways to exchange identity information that you want to exchange, right? So until we build that, the surveillance stuff's going to keep happening. Whereas if I could project, like, I'm in the market for X, Y, and Z type things because this life event just happened, that's really different than them stalking me to find that out. So there was a question over here.
So this is part of the foundation of what the metaverse is going to be, is the persistence of where you go and what you have. But there is no solution right now. From what I understand, there's a lot of different people trying their own solutions. But at the end of the day, is the only way to do this one unified solution? Like, for example, everybody decides we're using open wallet. for your wallet, regardless of where you go in the metaverse, or is it going to be a mixture of different solutions, or is it going to have to boil down to one thing for this to be truly what? Okay, yeah.
So I'll say that the Open Wallet Foundation, and this was maybe sort of skipped over, is really focused on building core libraries and engines for other people to go and use in their wallets. So it's like a kind of place to go get really awesome seeds for your garden, like your wallet, right? It's not going to ship the wallet that everyone will use. Yeah.
I skipped over it too much probably. But we're not building the Firefox of wallets that we expect everybody to go use. It's the componentry, like, different modules and things, as Clea suggested, that people could then use to build a wallet without having to go recreate it and do it themselves from scratch.
Yeah. I think there was another comment that you made, which I'd like to sort of pick out a bit, which is this assumption of immutability and foreverness about metaverse experiences. And I think it kind of comes from maybe the blockchain sort of connection point, right? We're used to the blockchain being this important building block, and it has this, double spend problem, has the immutability, issues. And so we think of metaverse experiences being like little blockchain worlds, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the way that it is. It could be experiences that you might have that are ephemeral, they're limited in time, and there won't be, any part of that experience stored. And then you could build protocols that try and amplify certain properties of that experience if that's the thing that you're trying to create. So I think it's just, I would hesitate to think of it as being a world where immutability is forever and, it's just the ever-growing connected graph of, correlation.
No.
I hope not. I hope there's parts of it that are, temporary and beautiful and then cease existing.
So we're at time, but I'll share that there are several of us, Hart, Sam, Wenjing, are all here from the digital identity communities, and I think all of us are going to the Internet Identity Workshop in November. So if you want to dive into the identity swimming pool with us, that's where our next party is. So thanks very much. There's the BOF tomorrow, yes, and it's at this same time, or is it 11:30?
I think it's 11:30.
It's at 11:30, so yeah.
There's one for your session and one for my session.
Awesome.
There's lots of,
Yeah,
we can really get into it.
great. Thanks.
Thank you.